The cold wind whipped through the empty streets of the alien city. Zora staggered forward, her once proud posture now slumped with exhaustion. She could barely remember the last time she had eaten or slept. It didn't matter now. She had nothing. Left her people, the Zorani, were known for their strength and wisdom, and Zora had been one of their finest. A skilled strategist, a respected officer, she had stood by the side of her people in countless battles. But all that had changed in a single moment. The council had turned on her. She had made a mistake, a costly one that had nearly cost the Zorani an important victory. They had given her a choice: leave or face execution. Zora had chosen to leave. She had thought she could find refuge somewhere, perhaps even among the humans, who were known for their fierce independence. But the cold, lonely streets of the alien city were a harsh reminder that she no longer belonged anywhere. She paused for a moment. Leaning against the stone wall of a dark alley, her breath shallow. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Her people had cast her out, and the galaxy felt like a vast, uncaring place. Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her. Her instincts kicked in, and she straightened up, her hand instinctively going too, the hilt of a blade she no longer trusted. She spun around, ready to fight, but stopped when she saw who it was. A human. Jason. A soldier she had met only a few days ago stood there, his dark eyes filled with concern. He was tall, wearing the standard uniform of his fleet, and he looked as though he had been searching for her. His face softened when he saw the look of fear in her eyes. "Zora," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "You don't have to be. Out here alone?" Zora took a step back, her eyes narrowing. She didn't trust anyone, especially not humans. They were too emotional, too impulsive. But something in Jason's gaze made her hesitate. She had never seen anyone look at her with such kindness. Even her people had never shown her this kind of concern. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't belong here." Jason didn't move, but his eyes didn't leave her. "You may not belong with your people anymore, but that doesn't mean you don't belong somewhere. You can stay with me. I'll protect you." Zora shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've failed my own people. They've thrown me away. I'm nothing." Jason stepped closer, his hand reaching out to her. "You're not nothing. You're just lost. I'll help you find your way." Zora looked at him, his outstretched hand, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. The anger and despair that had filled her heart for so long began to waver. She could feel the weight of her failure, the loneliness that had followed her since she was cast aside. But in Jason's eyes there was something else, something she had almost forgotten. Compassion? "You would help me?" Her voice barely audible. Jason nodded. "I don't care where you came from. I care about what you're going to do next." Zora's mind raced. She had never been shown kindness like this. Her people had always valued strength, and weakness had no place among them. She had failed, and now she was broken, cast aside. But Jason wasn't asking for her to prove herself. He wasn't judging her for her past. He was offering her something she hadn't even realized she needed, a chance to start over. "Why?" she asked, still struggling to understand. Jason's expression softened. "Because we're not so different. You and I've lost things too. People I loved. I know what it's like to be alone in this vast, cold universe." Zora took a slow breath, feeling the tightness in her chest ease slightly. She had spent so much time running, so much time hiding from her past, that she had forgotten what it felt like to trust. But Jason wasn't asking for her to be strong. He was offering her a chance to heal, to find herself again. "I don't know if I can trust you," Zora whispered, her voice trembling. "But I don't know where else to go." Jason smiled softly. "You don't have to trust me yet. But I promise I'll be here no matter what." Zora stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. But as she looked into Jason's eyes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. A way to rebuild, even if it meant taking the first step in a direction she had never imagined before. With a deep breath, she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll come with you." Jason smiled, relief flooding his face. He turned, motioning for her to follow him. Zora hesitated for a moment, then followed. For the first time since she was cast aside by her people, she felt like there might be a place for her in this world. Zora sat in the small room Jason had given her in the human settlement. The walls were simple, made of smooth metal, but it was the first time in days she had felt a sense of safety. The small window showed the city below, but the streets were distant and quiet, far away from the harsh world that had once been hers. She had spent the past few days in silence, recovering in the way humans healed. Jason had been kind, giving her space when she needed it, but always nearby, ready to help when she asked. It was strange to her. She wasn't used to people caring so much, especially not for someone like her. But Jason never made her feel weak, just wanted to help her find a way to live again. Zora's mind wandered back to the moment when she had first walked into his home. Her body had been bruised from the betrayal of her people. Her pride had been crushed, her heart broken, but in that moment, Jason had seen her as more than just a broken soul. He saw her as someone worth helping. She couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her like that. Jason had helped her with the basics: food, water, and rest, but it wasn't just the physical care that had made a difference. It was his patience. When she couldn't sleep, he would sit with her, talking about life in simple terms. He told her about Earth, his home planet, and about the soldiers who fought there. It was a world of struggle, of constant fight, but it was also a world where people fought for each other. It was strange. She had always been taught that emotions were weaknesses, that showing compassion made you vulnerable. But Jason was teaching her something different. Vulnerability didn't mean weakness. It meant strength, strength to trust, strength to help others without expecting anything in return. Zora stood from the bed and walked to the window. The world outside felt far away, but she could see the stars in the distance, far beyond the city's lights. The stars that her people had once sought to conquer. She had been part of that once, but now it all seemed meaningless. What did conquest matter when you had no one to share it with? The weight of her past still pressed on her, but Jason's kindness was slowly washing it away. Are you thinking about leaving? Jason's voice broke through her thoughts. Zora turned to see him standing in the doorway. He had come to check on her, as he often did. She nodded slowly. I should leave, she said, her voice distant. My people, they will never accept me again. I'm a failure. Jason walked in, his hands resting on his hips. No one's perfect, he said, his voice soft. You don't have to be perfect to matter. You matter because you're you. Zora turned her gaze back to the stars. I was once one of their best. They trusted me, but I made a mistake. I failed them. Jason's footsteps were quiet as he moved closer. You know, everyone fails. But that doesn't define who you are. It's what you do after the failure that matters. You're not defined by your mistakes. Zora blinked. She had never considered that before. All her life she had been taught that mistakes were a weakness, a failure that could never be overcome. But here, in this small room, standing with Jason, she began to see things differently. Maybe failure didn't mean the end. Maybe it was just another chance to start over. You really think that? She asked, her voice small. Jason smiled gently. I do. I know it's hard to believe, but you can start over. You don't have to carry that past with you forever. I've seen people pick themselves up after losing everything. I've done it myself. Zora looked at him, searching his face. He wasn't lying. She could see the truth in his eyes. He had lost things too, things that probably meant more than anything she could imagine. And yet here he was, offering her a second chance. Not just a chance at survival, but a chance to rebuild. Do you really think I can change? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I know you can, Jason said with a quiet confidence. It's not about who you were. It's about who you choose to be now. Zora felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she quickly wiped it away. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For so long, she had believed that she was beyond saving, that her mistakes had sealed her fate. But Jason had given her hope. He hadn't seen her as a broken Zorani soldier. He saw her as a person, someone who could still fight for a better future. I don't know how to start, she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "You don't have to do it alone," Jason said, taking a step closer. "You have me. You have yourself. Sometimes that's enough to make it through." Zora took a deep breath, feeling a small spark of courage in her chest. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Jason had shown her that there was more to life than past mistakes. It was a future, one she could create with her own hands. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking up at him, "for everything." Jason smiled and nodded. "Anytime." Zora turned back to the window. She wasn't sure what the future would bring, but she knew one thing. For the first time in a long while, she was ready to face it. She wasn't defined by her past. She was defined by what she chose to do next. And with Jason's help, she was ready to begin again. This part continues Zora's emotional journey of recovery, showing her shifting perspective on failure and strength, with Jason's support guiding her toward healing. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. The days passed in a slow, quiet rhythm. Zora had found a new life in the human settlement. And though she still carried the weight of her past, she was slowly starting to see a future. Jason had been her rock steady and unshaken, no matter how hard she pushed him away. He had shown her kindness when she hadn't known if she deserved it, and now she was beginning to think that maybe she did, but their peaceful life was not meant to last. One afternoon, as Zora worked on learning more about human culture, Jason walked into the room with a look of concern on his face. She could tell something was wrong. "Jason," she asked, her voice cautious. "What's happened?" Jason sighed and sat down across from her. His face was tense, the lines around his eyes betraying the worry he had been hiding. "There's been news. Words spreading. About you." Zora froze. The calm she had worked so hard to build shattered in an instant. She had known that her past would catch up with her, but hearing Jason speak the words made it real. "What kind of news?" "The council on your home planet, the Zarani, they've sent a message. They want you back. They're demanding you return to face charges." Zora's heart sank. She had known it would happen eventually. Her people would never forgive her. They had cast her out because of a mistake, and now they wanted to punish her for it. She had nothing left to return. What will they do to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jason leaned forward, his eyes filled with concern. "I don't know, but we won't let them take you. You've been through enough." Zora stared at him, uncertainty gripping her chest. She wanted to believe him, but she knew the truth. Her people didn't show mercy. They were quick to dispose of those who failed them. She had been weak once before. Would she be weak again? "What if I can't escape?" she whispered. "What if they come for me?" "Anyway," Jason shook his head. "We won't let that happen. We'll fight. We'll make sure you're safe." Zora felt a cold lump form in her throat. The idea of fighting against her own people, against the Zarani who had once been her family, filled her with dread. But the thought of returning to them, of facing their judgment, was even worse. She'd been thrown away once. She couldn't let it happen again. The next few days were filled with tense planning. Jason worked tirelessly, contacting his commanders and preparing for any possible confrontation. Zora stayed in the background, her mind constantly racing. Help but wonder if Jason truly understood what was at stake. The Zarani didn't just want her back, they wanted to erase her existence. One evening, as they sat in the small room together, Zora asked him, "Do you ever think we're just too different to fight together?" Jason looked at her, his eyes kind and steady. "I don't care how different we are. We fight for each other. That's all that matters." Zora felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words. It wasn't just about the fight ahead. It was about what he had shown her. The belief that differences didn't have to divide them, that kindness and loyalty could bridge any gap. But even with Jason's support, fear lingered in Zora's heart. She had no idea how the Zarani would respond. Would they simply take her back and execute her for her failure? Would they see her as a traitor, unworthy of mercy? Days passed, and the tension only grew. News from Zarani space began to filter through the human channels. The council. had issued a formal order for her return, demanding she be arrested for her crimes. Jason's commanders had discussed the situation, and although they were sympathetic, they had made it clear that if the Zorani decided to act, the humans would not get involved directly. Zora's fear was replaced by a fierce determination. She would not be controlled by her past anymore. She would not go back to the place that had thrown her away. She had made a life for herself here, with Jason, and she would fight to keep it. She stood before him one night, her decision clear. In her mind, I can't let them take me, Jason. I won't let them erase me. Jason stood up and placed a hand on her shoulder, looking her in the eye. Won't have to. We'll find a way. Together. The next morning, they made their move. Jason had gathered allies, other humans who believed in her and were willing to stand with her. Together, they made their way to the edge of the settlement, where they would prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Zora couldn't stop her mind from racing. She had never imagined that she would be forced to fight for her life, especially against her own people. The Zorani were a race built on logic, on strength, and on the belief that weakness had no place in their society. But she had learned from Jason that strength was more than just power. It was about standing up for what you believed in, no matter the cost. As they gathered in the shadows of the settlement, readying themselves for the battle to come, Zora felt a strange sense of peace. No matter the outcome, she had made her choice. She was no longer the broken Zorani soldier who had been cast aside. She was a survivor, fighting for her future. And in this moment, that was enough. Jason looked at her, his face full of determination. We're ready. Are you? Zora nodded. I'm ready. This part focuses on the growing tension between Zora and her past as her people demand her return. It highlights her internal struggle, her growing sense of resolve, and her deepening connection with Jason. Let me know if you'd like to adjust anything or need the next part. The morning sky was gray and heavy with clouds, casting an eerie quiet over the human settlement. Zora stood beside Jason, feeling a weight in her chest that she couldn't explain. She had thought long and hard over the past few days, wrestling with the decision that lay before her. It had started as a distant fear, though, returned to her people. But now it was closer, and it seemed unavoidable. She had been trained to fight, to lead, to stand tall in the face of impossible odds. But nothing in her life had prepared her for this. The Zorani Council, her former people, were waiting. They had demanded her return. The message was clear. She would be punished for her failure. She had no place with them anymore, but neither did she belong here with the humans. She was an outcast, and every choice she made seemed to lead her deeper into uncertainty. Jason stood by her, his presence a silent support. She could feel the weight of his gaze, steady and understanding. But there was something more in his eyes, something that she couldn't quite place. It was hope, hope that they could win, that they could make this work. Zora, Jason said, softly breaking the silence. You don't have to go back. You don't have to face them. Zora turned her eyes to him. His words were like a lifeline, but she didn't know how to grasp it. But what if they come for me anyway? What if? They don't stop until they have me. Jason stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll fight, Zora. I promise you. We'll fight for you. We'll make sure they can't take you. But deep down, Zora knew there was more at stake than just a fight. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about her identity. About where she belonged in a galaxy that had cast her out. Her people had thrown her away because she had failed. They had no mercy, no compassion. But what about the humans? She had seen their strength in a different way. Jason had shown her that strength could come from kindness, from standing up for what was right. He had asked for nothing in return, not even trust, and yet he had given her everything. Could she do the same for him? Could she fight for a future where they could both live without fear? What if I can't go back to them? Zora asked, her voice barely a whisper. What if they never accept me again? I've been branded a traitor, Jason. I'm nothing to them. Jason looked into her eyes, his voice firm. You are everything to me, and you're not nothing. You're more than the mistakes of your past. Zora felt the tears threatening to fall, but she refused to let them. She had learned to hold back her emotions, to bury them deep inside. But with Jason, it felt different. It felt like she could be herself without fear of rejection, without fear of being seen as weak. Jason continued, his voice steady. The choice is yours, Zora. I can't tell you what to do, but I can promise that I'll stand by you no matter what. If you choose to leave, I'll be here when you come back. If you choose to stay, I'll fight with you. No matter what happens, you won't be alone. Zora closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. She had been afraid for so long, afraid of facing her people, afraid of what they would do to her if she returned. But now, she was afraid of something else, of losing herself, of losing Jason, of choosing a path that would lead her back to the broken person she used to be. She had spent so many years hiding behind the walls she had built around her heart, believing that she had no future. But Jason had shown her that there was more. There was a chance for something better, something beyond the pain of the past. And the longer she waited, the harder it would be to choose. I don't want to be alone anymore, Zora said, her voice soft but strong. But I don't know if I can face them. I don't know if I can go back to that life. I don't know if I can be who I was before. Jason stepped even closer, lifting her chin so she could look him in the eye. You don't have to be who you were before. You can be who you are now, and who you are now is someone I want to fight for, someone I want to be with. Zora felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in so long. She had been looking for answers in places she could never find them among her people, in the galaxy, in the very idea of her past. But the answers had been right in front of her all along. The future wasn't in her past. It was here, with Jason, with the humans, with the life she could create from this moment forward. I choose to stay, Zora said, her voice strong. Now, I choose to fight with you. Jason's face broke into a smile, and Zora could see the relief and joy in his eyes. He reached out, pulling her into an embrace. We'll make it through this, together. For the first time in a long time, Zora felt the weight in her chest lift. It wasn't just the choice she had made, it was the feeling of belonging. She wasn't just a broken soldier anymore. She wasn't just someone cast aside. She was someone who could stand tall, someone who could face the future, and someone who could fight for it. As they stood there, the decision made, the world outside felt a little less threatening. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. No matter what came next, Zora had made her choice. And that, she realized, was the first step toward finding her place in the galaxy. In this part, Zora faces a critical decision about her future and comes to terms with her choice, finding strength in her bond with Jason. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. Zora stood with Jason, watching the horizon as dark ships appeared on the edge of the human settlement. She could feel the weight of her decision in the pit of her stomach. The Zorani had found them. They were coming for her, just as she feared. Jason had been right, this wouldn't be easy. But as she looked at him, standing strong by her side, she knew they would fight. They didn't have a choice anymore. You ready? Jason's voice was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes, a determination she had come to trust. Zora nodded. I'm ready. The Zorani ships were massive, their sleek design cutting through the sky like predators hunting their prey. There were too many of them, too many to count. Zora's heart raced in her chest as she watched them land. She could feel the tension in the air, the sense that everything she had worked so hard to build was about to be torn apart. Jason gave her a reassuring smile, but Zora could see the worry behind his eyes. He had never faced a battle like this, not on his own terms. But Zora knew he would do whatever it took to protect her. That's what made him different from the soldiers she had known before. He fought not for honor or glory, but for the people he cared about. They're here, Jason said quietly, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. Zora didn't feel fear. She felt anger, a fierce rage that had been building inside her ever since she had been cast aside by her own people. The Zorani had rejected her, and now they thought they could come for her like she was some kind of criminal. But Zora wasn't that person anymore. She wasn't the broken soldier they had discarded. She wasn't their failure. Jason turned to her. "We'll stand together," he said, his voice firm. "We fight for you. We fight for us." Zora looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Jason, and she had herself. "They're not taking me," Zora said, her voice steady, not without a fight. The first group of Zorani soldiers stepped off their ships. They moved in perfect unison, their armor shining in the dim light. Zora recognized them. Some were former comrades, people she had once fought beside. They were the ones who had condemned her, the ones who had cast her out without a second thought. As they approached, Zora's fists clenched. She could hear their voices, cold, emotionless, demanding her return. But she didn't care. She had no intention of going back. Not to their world, not to their rules. Jason stood beside her, his hand on his weapon, ready for whatever came next. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He was ready. The Zorani leader, a tall figure in black armor, stepped forward. He looked at Zora with disdain, his eyes cold and judgmental. "You are a traitor, Zora. You will return with us and face justice for your crimes." Zora didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her eyes burning with defiance. "Not a traitor," she said, her voice strong. "I'm someone who made a mistake and chose to live. You may call it a crime, but I call it survival." The leader sneered. "Survival. You left us when we needed you most. You abandoned your people, your honor." Zora's eyes hardened. "You abandoned me first. You threw me away when I failed. Now, you think you can come back and take me like I'm nothing? Well, you're wrong." Jason stepped forward, standing tall beside her. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me first." The leader's eyes flickered with surprise, but he quickly regained his composure. "You're a human. You don't belong here. Leave before this gets ugly." Zora felt the anger rising within her, but she kept it controlled. She wasn't about to let this fight turn into something she couldn't control. She had learned to trust herself, to trust Jason, to fight not just with her body, but with her mind. "We're not going anywhere," Zora said, her voice unyielding. "Don't decide what happens to me anymore." "I do," the leader sneered. Again, but before he could speak, Jason moved. He didn't wait for orders, didn't wait for permission. He raised his weapon, taking the first shot. It wasn't an attack, it was a warning. A single blast fired into the air, causing the Zorani soldiers to hesitate. "Get ready," Jason said, his voice low and commanding. Zora tightened her grip. On the weapon she had been training with, a human-made gun designed for defense. It wasn't the same as the weapons she had used in battle with her own people, but it would do. She could fight. She could defend herself. She would. As the Zorani soldiers moved to surround them, Zora stepped forward, her stance strong. This was her moment, her choice. The fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to fight. She would no longer be the victim. She would no longer hide behind the mistakes of the past. Jason raised his weapon again. The battle began. Blasts filled the air as the humans and Zorani soldiers clashed. Zora moved with precision, her training kicking in as she fired. She could hear Jason's voice beside her, steady and calm as he directed their defense. Together, they fought. Together, they stood against the odds. Zora's thoughts raced as the battle raged on. She had once believed she was nothing, that her failures defined her. But now, as she fought alongside Jason, she realized that the only thing that defined her was her will to fight, to survive, and to protect the future she had chosen. The Zorani soldiers pushed forward, but they hadn't prepared for the strength of the human spirit, for the unyielding force of someone who had been broken and had chosen to stand again. Zora wasn't going back. She wasn't going to be anyone's failure. She was a survivor, and this fight was hers. In this part, Zora takes a stand against her past, defying the Zorani soldiers who seek to take her back. The battle represents her reclaiming control over her future. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. The sound of blaster fire echoed in the air as Zora ducked behind cover, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle with the Zorani soldiers had been fierce, but they hadn't expected the humans to fight back with such determination. It wasn't just about survival. Any Merit was about standing up for everything. Zora had learned since meeting Jason. She looked over at him. He was crouched next to her, his face focused, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes as he reloaded his weapon. "We're holding them back," he said, his voice calm. "But we need to move fast." Zora nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady. She had made her choice. There was no turning back now. Together, they had fought back the first wave of Zorani soldiers, but more were coming. Zora could feel the weight of their presence, the pressure of her past closing in. The Zorani had sent their best soldiers, but they hadn't expected to face a fight like this. She had always thought of herself as a warrior, but now she realized that her strength wasn't just in her ability to fight, it was in her will to keep going, to stand up no matter how hard it got. No matter how many times she'd been knocked down, Zora took a moment to glance over the battlefield. The humans had set up defensive positions, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. It was a strange feeling, fighting alongside them as if she had always belonged here. The humans didn't care about her past. They didn't judge her for her mistakes. They fought beside her, and that was all that mattered. "Zora," Jason said, breaking her thoughts, "we need to move now. We've got a chance to push them back." She looked at him, seeing the trust in his eyes. He was right. This was their chance. Zora had never imagined she would be fighting a battle like this, but now that she was here, she realized that it wasn't just about survival. It was about fighting for a future. Her future. She stood up, taking her weapon in hand, ready to move. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice firm. Jason moved first, taking the lead. Zora followed close behind, her every step filled with purpose. They moved through the battlefield, dodging incoming fire and making their way toward the center of the Zorani forces. It wasn't easy. Every move had to be precise, every decision made quickly, but Zora felt more alive than she had in years. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the life she had begun to build with Jason. As they approached the Zorani soldiers, Zora could see the hesitation in their eyes. They had expected her to be weak, to crumble under the pressure of facing them again. But they hadn't counted on her determination, her strength, or the fact that she had found something worth fighting for. The leader of the Zorani forces, the one who had once called her a traitor, stood at the front, watching them with disdain. "You're wasting your time," he called out. "You'll never defeat us. You'll never be more than a failure." Zora's heart clenched at his words, but she didn't flinch. She was no longer the person he remembered. She wasn't the soldier who had been discarded. She was stronger now, stronger than she had ever been. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore," Zora said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You abandoned me, and now you'll see that I've made something of myself." Jason moved to her, sighed, his eyes filled with determination. "We're not going anywhere. We'll fight until the end," the Zorani leader sneered. "And you will die." But Zora wasn't afraid anymore. She had spent too long running from her past, too long, hiding from the mistakes that had defined her. Now she was ready to face whatever came next, because she knew one thing for certain: she had a future. End. She wasn't going to let anyone take it from her. With a single powerful move, Zora fired her weapon. The blast hit its target, and the Zorani leader stumbled back in surprise. He wasn't dead, but the shock in his eyes was enough. Zora's confidence grew, and the humans around her pushed forward. Rallying behind her, the Zorani soldiers, seeing their leader falter, hesitated. This was not the outcome they had expected. They had underestimated Zora, thinking she was just another broken soul. But she wasn't. She was a fighter. She had found something worth fighting for. Jason moved quickly, taking out another soldier with a well-placed shot. The humans were holding their ground, working together like a team, something Zora had never experienced before. It was a strange feeling, the sense of belonging. She wasn't alone. She wasn't the outcast anymore. She was part of something bigger than herself. The battle continued, but Zora could feel the tide turning. The Zorani forces were faltering, and with every moment they lost ground. Zora pushed forward, her every step filled with determination. The humans had her back. Jason had her back. And she had made a choice to stand, to fight, and to claim her future. As the Zerani forces began to retreat, Zora knew this battle wasn't just about survival. It was about something more. It was about showing the galaxy that she wasn't the broken, discarded soldier they had once known. She was someone who had fought for a future. And no one would take that away from her. The last of the Zerani soldiers fled, leaving Zora and Jason standing victorious. The battle was over, but for Zora, it felt like the beginning of something new. The pain of her past was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had faced her enemies and won. She had chosen to stand, and she had chosen to fight. And that was the first step toward a future she could finally call her own. Jason turned to her, a smile on his face. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. Zora looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We did it," she repeated, her voice steady and strong. The galaxy was vast. But for the first time in a long time, Zora felt like she had found her place in it. In this part, Zora and Jason fight back against the Zerani forces, with Zora fully embracing her strength and the life she's building. It shows her growth and the bond between her and Jason. Let me know if you'd like any changes or the next part.